yeah, I just think, for those entering or potentially considering the entrepreneurial journey, know what you're signing up for. The deck is definitely stacked against you. And I would say, a lot of guys ask me like, how should I fund it? And, what should I consider? And I think where you are on the risk continuum matters. If you're in your 20s or 30s, or I'll just say if you're single with no family yet, whatever age you are, you should definitely be way more willing to take risk. If you're, established with 3 or 4 kids and you're married, that's probably not the time to put a lien against the house and get a second mortgage for this, $100,000 you need to do the first product order and whatever else you need to start up. So definitely consider that. Also consider your family situation. It is going to probably be pretty taxing on your time, and particularly if you're going to work a primary job, to still maintain regular income. And I would, a lot of people say, and even us included, it's like, oh, burn the boats and you got to go all in. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, particularly where you're at, because there's plenty of hours in the day. You could still keep your income, but have the side hustle going. And I would be a hypocrite if I didn't call that out, because that was me for 8 years of Born Primitive. I was active duty. So I can't say, oh, go burn the ships. Well, why was I active duty then, right? So, but realize with that, you're sacrificing a lot of your own lifestyle now, because there are only so many hours in the day. And if you're working a regular 9 to 5, that's demanding. And then, every other waking minute, you're trying to feed this little newborn, which is pretty much what it is, while maintaining, a good relationship with your spouse and being present father, all these, or mother, any of these other things. There's trade-offs, and something has to give. So when guys are considering that, I try to bring these different considerations up. Where are you at in your life right now? Who else is depending on you? And that should help you determine where on that risk continuum you land, as far as like, do I want to raise capital? Can I go get a line of credit with the bank for $30,000, or do a HELOC on my house? I do that all the time. I love HELOCs. We can talk about it. I mean, I've used it to help Born Primitive a bunch. So I just bring that up because it's a question frequently asked. And I would say for people that have the itch, and you have that knack, like then probably go for it. But if you're like half in, half out, it's working a 9 to 5 and working for the so-called man can be still a great gig. And there's advantages to that. If it's done right, you don't have to bring it home with you, and you can really be present and have other activities, and you can really have a balanced lifestyle. So I just bring that up to kind of frame up the conversation, but also, looking under the hood of Born Primitive a little bit is like making people realize it is not as glorious as you think. And even very successful businesses are kind of in the that pressure cooker all the time. And I would say we're included in that. So, Tony, I'll say this last thing about, cash flow. Yes, I think that was the first topic we wanted to talk about, was kind of cash flow of a business, especially for a business that sells products versus services. There's a huge difference. And I always joke, if I ever do another business, I'm not going to sell anything that is actually a real thing. I'm going to sell a service. You know what I mean? I want to go to be a private consultant for brands and help them build their brands and just bill them every month. With a services business, once the service is rendered, you get paid, and that's the end of it, and you make the margin right there. Well, when you sell goods, you have to reorder the next batch of inventory, and you're in essentially perpetually kicking the can down the road to actually make money. So let's say in a given year, you make, I'm just making up numbers, like, you make $8 million, and you're like, wow, this was a great year for the company, healthy bottom line. Okay, well, everyone should be able to pull a good amount off the table from that, and let's rejock and do it again next year. Well, guess what? You want to try to make $10 or $11 million the next year. So what do? At the end of that year, you put in a giant order to purchase inventory, because of course that's what you need to sell the following year. But here's the caveat: you can't write off that expense as a write-off with Uncle Sam. So if you made $8 million and you wire $5 million on December 31st, in theory, you'd be like, oh, well, I can write off $5 million. Now I only made $3 million. Uncle Sam says, no, you can write off the goods of that order when you sell them, which in a perfect world is the following year. But if it's inventory, if you order wrong, some of that stuff you might be selling 2-3 years later. So you can't actually write it off. So what happens is Uncle Sam says, hey, Born Primitive and the owners, which of course I'm one of them, you guys made $8 million. So you owe us 40% of that, because our income is passed through to individual owners, called pass-through income, the way we're structured. So Bear, you owe your share of 40%, of that. So we have to pay Uncle Sam, when at that time is due, a large amount on money we didn't actually make, right? Because from a cash flow standpoint, we only made $3 million, right? And that's of course to keep fueling the business, payroll, the rent, all these, our huge meta budget that we spend on advertising. So it's something that people from the outside don't realize that is an interesting dilemma. Is like your bottom line could be massive, and you could actually not be making money in a practical sense. The bottom line is going to show it, and your tax returns are going to show it. But that's the dilemma that people face, with a goods business is that inventory, and eventually, if you were to say, all right, we're never going to order again, and we're just going to, whatever's left in our warehouse, we're going to sell, you would actually make a ton of money in those last 9 to 12 months because you wouldn't be, sending more money out. So I'll stop there. Obviously, I know you're very well read into this to help us direct this, but I thought that was one kind of thing that we could dive into that others might not realize for like a goods type business.